Here we are at our time, bowing to everyone as they come. Let's enjoy our sitting together now. Vast is the robe of liberation, a formless field of benefaction. Wearing the universal teaching, I realize the one true nature, thus harmonizing all being. Vast is the robe of liberation, a formless field of benefaction. Wearing the universal teaching, I realize the one true nature, thus harmonizing all being. Vast is the robe of liberation, a formless field of benefaction. Wearing the universal teaching, I realize the one true nature, thus harmonizing all being. Welcome, everyone. It's good to see you. Get my voice cleared up here. I was thinking as we were sitting, one thing that came up as I'm looking at you is that we have an amazing array of locations represented, which we know, but it's easy for those of us here to become very Americocentric, and we have folks from Canada and the UK, from Switzerland and Spain, and, Mexico, all over. And it's important, I think, to remember that. But wherever we are, I'm guessing that there are a few things that are similar. Many, but the ones I'm thinking about now is it seems to me that we're kind of drowning in a sea of commentary and other analogies that kept coming to me. I feel like I've been sort of overtaken by a tsunami. You see those images of a tsunami where it reaches the shore and pushes, being overtaken by a tsunami of opinions for and against everything. And it seems also assaulted by loud shouts of right and wrong and left and right and all the different sources from which it arises. And I feel continually kind of bludgeoned by the brutal and unending cycle of the news. Any of this resonate with other people? But then that brings up the question of why in the world would we then sit in silence? And as I sat with that question, I thought, that's not really the right question. Or it's a question that's not really clear enough. It comes up like, why would you sit in silence in response to all this? And I thought, well, I think we must sit in silence and stillness like we just did to help align ourselves with our best and truest nature. So when we stand up and when we speak up, we're doing so from a wise and compassionate position. Remember, all the iconography from the Buddhist tradition, no matter which kind of brand you look at, wisdom carries a sword. Discernment is crucial and it's precise. And compassion is fiercely on the side of all who suffer, leaving nobody unseen and nothing unspoken. Yes, wisdom opens clarity and helps us see more clearly. That's why Manjushri carries a sword for discernment. And compassion isn't just soft and loving, it's fierce, because it takes a ferocity sometimes to meet the suffering that a bodhisattva of compassion would need. So, how is our practice the basis for a clear and maybe fierce response to life these days? Remember the definition of appamada, for example. We use mindful, diligent care as the way we understand that. So mindful means you meet things just as they are, not distorted. You attend in the present moment to what's actually happening. Diligent is a constant effort towards something, diligently offering yourself in mindfulness. And care is crucial. It's the protective, generous, and uncompromising quality of protection. Appamada is said to protect the mind and the heart from distortion and from difficulty. So mindful, attentive, diligent, energetic care is a very powerful response to life. And then you hear something in the Metta Sutra, for example, the scripture on loving kindness, where it says, even as the mother at the risk of her life watches over and protects her only child, so with a boundless mind should one cherish all living things. That's such a beautiful line. It's very tenderizing. But think of all the mothers and all the mother animals in the world. At the risk of her life, watches over and protects her only child. They're not subtle. They're not sweet. And so this is a part that we have to remember about practice, is it's about removing every barrier to love there is, and sometimes that requires some power. But there's a key to it, I think, and this is what I want to talk about today. And I want to go to just a little bit of the shimmering, not a lot of it. It's, as you know, it's one of my favorite things to teach from. And as I was putting this together, I was doing some errands and driving around. And I usually listen to Dharma talks when I drive around. Any of you do that? When you're sitting around, So I was listening to Norman Fisher, and he was talking about the shimmering this last few weeks. Some curious thing. Here's just the first little segment. And I'm only going to really focus on the first line, but I want this first segment from this poem of the third ancestor. Many of you are familiar with it. Just let it kind of wash over you here, just this little bit of it. The great way isn't difficult for those who are unattached to their preferences. Let go of longing and aversion, and everything will be perfectly clear. When you cling to a hair's breadth of distinction, heaven and earth are set apart. If you want to realize the truth, don't be for or against. The struggle between good and evil is the primal disease of the mind. That's exactly what we hear in the news, right? It's exactly the opposite. And then later on in the middle of the whole long poem, it says, don't keep searching for the truth. Just let go of your opinions. So this is in large part why the practice of Zazen is so revolutionary and so necessary. It's profoundly revolutionary and incredibly necessary. And we don't emphasize this a lot, and I think it might be important. When you receive Zazen instruction for the ceremony of Zazen, the actually sitting practice, the instruction includes, do not move, do not speak. You engage in the ceremony by relinquishing your engagement with everything else, which is essentially saying, don't make any comment, no comment. When you're sitting and you scratch that itch That's a comment. I want to do that because it's uncomfortable and I'll be able to sit. What if you don't? How many of the itches around your life can you not scratch? Another, don't move immediately at the first signal of discomfort. Can you actually stay and make no comment on the discomfort? Because your natural state, the primary awareness, is making no comment. It's just reflective awareness. Certainly not speaking, not even signaling. Stopping making those comments on what's happening in the world. And this provides a containment for yourself and for others in a way that's quite profound. And it sounds a bit harsh in the beginning, but hopefully you can begin to feel the necessity of it. What this is not is suppression or dissociation. We're not saying don't feel what you feel, don't know what you know, or dissociate and space out so you don't recognize the signals. It's the opposite. Turn toward everything. Let yourself be immersed in it. Just don't make a comment on it. It's not about shutting down or numbing. Allow everything to move through you. It's not about turning away. It's a profound turning toward. But you see how revolutionary this is and how odd it is and how different it is? Zazen is a profound request. I'm going to use some of Norman's words that actually comes from one of his books, but he says most of us are too impatient to wait. He's using the word waiting, which I'm not a total fan of, but it's useful to hear what he says. Most of us are too impatient to wait, like for the bell. We can't sit still for it and rush forward with more plans and schemes, actions of all sorts. So these are all our comments. Sometimes we are willing to wait, but we don't know how. Real waiting requires that we drop all the goals and plans and be willing to sit at the edge of our seats. Alert, aware, pregnant with anticipation, but not anticipation for something. Waiting is another paradox. We're waiting, but not for something. We're waiting for nothing. Most of us find this intolerable, impossible. This is the edge I'm talking about in Zazen. In one of his beautiful books on Ulysses, actually, Norman talks about the sea god Proteus, who could change forms in response to conditions. And when he talks about Ulysses trying to get home and trying to return, meeting things that were in his way and barriers and fierce things that would stop him. Proteus was one of the images of changeability. So here's what he said, and I'm going to quote a couple of paragraphs here, so it's a little bit longer, but this is so important. He says, the story of Proteus tells us that we can escape from a tough situation by holding fast in the face of many quick and dangerous changes. Just think about that sentence right now in your life and in the life of the world that we live in. That we can escape from a tough situation by holding fast in the face of many quick and dangerous changes. This is the practice, he says, this is the practice of forbearance, my favorite spiritual discipline. Though it is not very popular or exciting, forbearance is the greatest of all spiritual qualities, because without it, all other good qualities, intentions, insights, and powers will be wiped away as soon as the first leopard, serpent, or boar appears in the vicinity. He's referring to these things that assailed Ulysses. You can fill in the blanks on that one. You can be strong, intelligent, kind, say your prayers every day. You can meditate till your legs fall off. You can have beautiful spiritual experiences, meet God face to face, serve your neighbor with compassion and zeal. You can be creative and talented in many ways. But if you're not ready and able to hang in there when conditions suddenly and fiercely change, then your spiritual practice, however devoted or brilliant it may be, is in the final analysis pretty useless. It's the changes, the constant shifts, and sudden reversals that prove us. And then he makes one more comment. He says, to practice forbearance is to appreciate and celebrate the heart's vulnerability, and to see that the slicing and piercing of the heart does not require defense, that the heart's vulnerability is a good thing, because wounds can make us more peaceful and more real, if that is, we're willing to hang on to the leopard of our fear, the serpent of our grief, the boar of our shame, without running away or being hurled off. Forbearance is simply holding on steadfastly with whatever it is that unexpectedly arises, not doing anything, not fixing anything, because doing and fixing can be a way to cover up the heart, to leap over the hurt and pain by occupying ourselves with schemes and plans to get rid of it. Just holding on for dear life. Holding on to what comes is what makes life dear. Now that's powerful. And we know this, but sometimes we come to the limit of it when things change powerfully and irrevocably around us in ways that we can't see any way around. So how do we practice with this? How do we practice forbearance? How do we practice the sitting still in the face of it all, the waiting he talks about that seems intolerable, without comment? So here's a few clues, one from Reb Anderson, one from Blanche Hartman, one from the Buddha. You remember my saying that I was asking Reb one time how our mind is shaped. We were facing this wall. He said, I said, what is the wall? He said, the wall is saying, thank you very much. I have no complaints whatsoever. The wall is just there, meeting you. It has no comment. Thank you very much. I have no complaints whatsoever. So can we make our mind like that wall? Not blank, unmoving, unfeeling, dead, but steady and present. Because this is not an attitude toward life or the world. The wall is teaching you something about your mind. It doesn't mean you sit and face life and do nothing. But can you have a mind that's not full of reactivity? Can you step back into an IFS we call self-energy and not be thrown off by all these, all the parts that are trying to take you somewhere else, scurrying out of fear and protection? We have to pay attention to those, learn from them, but not let them lead. Thank you very much. I have no complaints whatsoever. And then Blanche, once I asked her late in our practice, one of the last times we had Dokusan, I asked her how I should continue. She said, take care of your mudra, meaning the mudra, when we're sitting. Take care of your mudra? That would be her advice? Excuse me. But she was saying, take care of your life. Not to fix or solve all the problems, not to figure out, she didn't think I'm not going to figure out my life once and for all, but engage with curiosity and gratitude, like I'm paying attention to my mudra. You sit for a while and then it kind of collapses or it gets tight or you forget about it. To keep coming back with curiosity and gratitude, but a kind of a fierce willingness to engage. All the invitations that come from life. And the invitations really are to cause further harm. Life, they're usually engaged with me so we can keep this harm going. And your unwillingness to is taking care of your mood, taking care of the shape of wholeness and openness. Keep your shape. And the Buddha said then, hatred does not cease by hatred, but by love alone. This is the eternal rule. Hatred does not cease by hatred. We get that, well, but only by love. It's like, what? What kind of love is this? How do we take care of our lives, our mudra, without complaint, like the wall, guided by love, this eternal rule? You've also heard me say that Zazen or Zen practice does not answer your questions. It questions your answers. As we sit and we practice, we meet our life, which is our answer to the demands of life. The way we're living, that's our answer. So it questions our answer. It doesn't give us answers to our questions. I don't know the answers to the problems we face. I don't. I don't expect to. But I have a really good idea of the kind of person I want to be as I seek responses and solutions in my life. And I have a deep longing for the kinds of qualities of community I want to surround myself with as we meet the world together. Those things I have a pretty good idea about, but not the answers. You know, all of us come to practice with personal problems. Every one of us. That's probably what draws us to it in some way. And then we engage in practice and we study the precepts and we participate in retreats and we attend inquiry like this and listen to Dharma talks and read our books and help out with the Sangha. We do all of these things and suddenly we're immersed in this world of practice. And a really curious thing happens. We get involved in all this stuff all through the years, and that becomes where we're focused in. But our problems never really get solved. It doesn't actually solve the problems. Yet we open more fully and find more peace, and we shine more brightly as human beings together. And the problem that we started out with, we say, oh, that's still there, but it doesn't look like a problem anymore. Or even what we call problems changes because of what we've immersed ourselves in. Or I move to a space in which there is not a problem anymore, but nothing's really been fixed. It's an odd thing. I hope this makes sense, but it's like nothing got solved at one point, but we look back and realize things have changed. I want to go back and read just for a moment a very early poem by David Whyte, one that's been there a long time. Some of you probably know, of course, but it's not referenced much. He's producing so much these days. It's this short poem called Sometimes. So listen to it, and then I'm going to make some comments. Sometimes, if you move carefully through the forest, breathing like the ones in the old stories, who could cross a shimmering bed of leaves without a sound, you come to a place whose only task is to trouble you with tiny but frightening requests, conceived out of nowhere, but in this place, beginning to lead everywhere. A request to stop what you're doing right now and to stop what you're becoming while you do it. Questions that can make or unmake a life. Questions that have patiently waited for you. And questions that have no right to go away. Those lines in the middle, a request to stop what you're doing right now and to stop what you're becoming while you do it. It's a really great definition of Zazen. To stop what you're doing right now and to stop what you're becoming while you do it. We sit in silence and stillness without too much comment, without all our reactivity, without doing something. And by doing so, we interrupt this process of self-ing, constructing and maintaining the self-centered dream of how you want it to go. This request is stop what you're doing right now and to stop what you're becoming while you do it. Then something else is possible. He started the poem by saying, sometimes if you move carefully through the forest, breathing like the ones in the old stories, move across a shimmering bed of leaves without a sound. Sometimes if you can move through your life like the ancestors, breathing like the ones in the old stories, move across a shimmering bed of leaves without a sound. That's an old Celtic image from Ireland, but he's talking about, can you move through life without making waves, without making a mess? You come to a place, he says, whose only task is to trouble you with tiny but frightening requests. That's the reason we don't do it. Because if we get still and we get quiet and we become attentive, those requests come, conceived out of nowhere, but in this place, beginning to lead everywhere. That's the good news. Begin to meet our questions, not intellectual questions, but requests, frightening requests, such as don't speak, don't move, don't comment in any way, and learn to rest in the vast awareness that is the background, the very ground of your being, of everything. Questions that can make or unmake a life. Yeah. Questions that have patiently waited for you. Questions that have no right to go away. Practice is endless. Not because it's unsolvable, because it's not solvable, not because you don't arrive anywhere, there's nowhere to arrive. It's an endless life and death, as I spoke about last week. And why is all this important? Once again, I start talking about this practice stuff. It's like, okay, back to reality. Why is it important? And this is actually one of the questions that has no right to go away. Why is this all important? This is one of the ones that you should stay with all the time. It's back where we started, when I started talking. Because after we get involved in practice and with each other, things get really interesting and really powerful. And we have these experiences which move through us, and we evolve a culture in which all this stuff seems normal. We take it for granted in a way. We have these shared experiences and a shared set of teachings and vocabulary. We have this world we've constructed, and even a shared worldview. And we forget that we're in it. But then we try to explain it to someone not involved in practice. A family member who wants to know what in the hell you're doing. And try to talk to someone who thinks about that they do understand what practice is, just not the way you do. What do you say? What is your understanding? How is any of this stuff important or useful at all, given the world we live in right now? So here are 4 questions and some responses to them. This is inquiry inside myself, okay? I'm just writing it down. First question, why would you spend time sitting in silence facing a wall? It's a waste of time. There are things to do. My response, well, because you learn something by sitting you can never learn in any other way. And we need to retain and protect the basic sanity and wholesomeness we know to be our natural state. That's why we would sit facing a wall. Next question, what good does it do to have an insight into this natural state you talk about, which you describe as free and balanced? So what? What does it do? Well, I would respond, because over time, we get so convinced that our everyday thoughts and feelings are reality, and that we should use them as our guide for wisdom and compassion. And to see otherwise is revolutionary. We have to care more for the goodness of life than we should care for the maintenance of our own personal stories. We should be more committed to good in life than our own personal stories. Next question. Well, okay, but don't you want to feel good? Why wouldn't you want to do whatever you could to feel better, even blissful, which some spiritual traditions hold out as a shiny goal? Don't you want to be happy? And I would say, of course, people want to be happy. I do, and at peace. But trying to create happiness and push away sorrow is a prescription for suffering, not its cure. It doesn't work that way. That's why it's endless. But there's no way you're going to understand what I'm saying without practice. It just doesn't make any sense in the everyday world. There is a joy and a peace that's unbreakable and does not depend on happiness. But this is really hard to see without practice. And the last question that this fictional person is saying to me in my own mind, does this really help you? Does this really help you? Well, sadly and clearly, this question doesn't land in an ordinary way. Does it help you any more than the others? Because it's not that it doesn't make any sense. It's just not the right question. It emerges like from a whole different universe or view of what's possible. So it doesn't translate. Like, help me? The question about helping me is what doesn't help. And then the difficult, just sit without comment. That's a hard sell. And this doesn't help the questioner. So you smile and maybe change the subject, which basically means allowing them to return to talking about themselves and how bad things are. But maybe, just maybe, they'll come to sit with you one day. And I've used a lot of time today with a lot of energy, and there's one more warning label on the package. I have to say, like the label, what can happen if you do this, or side effects, Please, if you raise your hand today, do not bring me questions and commentary about politics, about the presidential election, or the Supreme Court. We're already awash in that, and I don't want to play the ain't it awful game. It's a waste of time. And we don't have time to waste. Every person from every other country represented here can have their own list. See Catherine shaking her head over there. Now, do not lose sight of what is possible with practice. Wholesome, fierce, kind, shared practice. And inquire deeply into what it means to practice in the midst of everything with anything. Why am I emphasizing no comment? How are you going to practice with what is being called up by everything? What is it that's called for? So I hope you understand my request here. And maybe nothing comes forward. Maybe that leaves you with nothing. That's okay. We can sit in silence with no comment. Canada comes forward. Shelley. You don't have to represent the whole country, Shelley. I was just joking.
I just wondered if you could say a little bit more about forbearance, because where I get caught is when do you know that it's a time to move, and when do you know that it's a time to stay?
Exactly. That's an excellent question. That's the wisdom side and the compassion side, because what's the wise decision and what's the caring moment when you meet? There isn't a list that says, it's not a nursing protocol that says this is when you do that, but you have to practice deeply, listen carefully, stay just a moment longer. Is this it? Is this it? Then sometimes you say, I think this is it. I think I'm going to make a move. I think I'm going to change. I think I'm going to do something. And then the practice continues. You keep paying attention. That's not the end. Oh, what did that do? Did that offer me more freedom so I can open further? Or did that bring me back into smaller sense of satisfactory small self? Like the attention doesn't stop. The wisdom keeps opening no matter what you choose. And the compassion continues because you want to make sure you're caring for yourself and others.
So that what I think you're pointing to is that if I hold with the forbearance and I shift into deciding something different, and I can continue to study and it feels like I'm in the in the expanded self, then that's, even if I'm thinking I might be making a mistake, it might be okay to go in that direction.
You keep paying attention. You keep getting
Okay.
that. It's just the kind of experimental attitude that you know from Hakomi and the work you're doing, to where you keep getting information. You keep staying close to the moment.
Okay.
It's not a decision that you make based on some ideology and position that you're going to impose on the situation.
Well, and it was the piece about the embodiment that you pointed at just now that I think is going to be really helpful, because either it takes you in, like,
Yes.
to open, or it takes you to small.
And that's why our practice is an embodied practice. It isn't figuring stuff out, it's sitting and finding a posture that is stable enough, so you can stop commenting
Yeah.
and then notice all the comments that come up. And that's a training for when you stand up and speak up, but it doesn't end. It's not like you make a decision that it's done. No, then you're noticing that response. Now that's a new response.
Right. Thank you.
It's an excellent question. Thank you. And Sue?
Hi. I don't know how to get good. Um, Thank you. This really touched me because last week I was having a long conversation with someone from my sangha, and we were talking about. I was telling about a difficulty that I was having, and we were just not dwelling in it, but sort of talking about how common something was and that kind of thing. And, we just said, well, we don't really have to change it. It's okay. But it's not okay. But we can take the pressure off ourselves by not changing this. And then the next morning I got up, and I don't know if it's like being struck by embodiment or what, but things had changed. And it was like, oh, then I'm starting to search. Am I crazy? Am I making this up? I'm going through all these kinds of things. And I, just kind of had to say, it's okay. It's okay. Just go with it and move with it. But that's unsettling. And, it's easy to spiral off.
Isn't it interesting how challenging grace can feel?
Yes.
One wouldn't think so.
No, you'd think you would. I mean, you'd think you'd just be exuberant.
But it's another way that the rug is pulled out. And often we use that metaphor, the rug pulled out, because like something bad happens. Well, what if the rug of your certainty is pulled out so something new is possible? That's another kind of grace, that it moved on its own.
It did, and it allowed me to open up.
Yes. And that's
think
what Kelly was talking about. And then in your body, you realize, oh, okay,
yeah.
let's take one more step. It's not the answer, it's a direction.
Oh, that's a good way to put it. It's the direction.
Not the answer, it's the direction.
Mhm. Yeah,
Great
that
example.
describes it well.
Great example. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hey, Brahman.
There we go.
Good. I know you by your ceiling.
Yeah, do you want me to move?
No. I was just laughing at myself because in the beginning it was just the ceiling. I thought, oh, I know where that is.
Could you say those last words again? Tell me the name of the woman who just spoke. I
Sue.
love it. Sue, those last
She's
words.
from Madison, Wisconsin.
It's not, because I had it memorized.
It's not the answer, it's the direction.
That's it. It's not the answer, it's the direction. I've been, as you know, sitting and not knowing for quite a while. And there's, I get excited about something. And then I kind of stay in not knowing. I have the excitement and I have the not knowing.
Mm-hmm.
And then the not knowing becomes sometimes, in this instance that I'm talking about, I have to make a decision.
Right. At some point you have to do something. That's what Shelley was talking about. Sometimes you have to then do something,
And not knowing sometimes is the direction, don't go.
Sometimes.
And so in something that just happened, not knowing, and then hearing kind of from outside, maybe you don't want to, maybe that's not, maybe that would bring in this and this and this, and maybe it's not time to do that. And I listen to words that come in. I listen to see what happens inside.
Yep.
What happened inside was an incredible relief.
Mm-hmm.
And so, wow, sometimes relief, staying and not knowing, but noticing when relief or tightness happens I found as a way for me to navigate.
Exactly. And that is what Shelley was talking about. Do you feel the opening or do you feel the contraction in your body? How do you know? Well, you're giving a great example of it.
And so yesterday it was like, when you're out in the wind and you get really used to the wind and the movement. And yesterday it was like going in a room and closing the door. And it was like, whew. Mm-hmm. I realized there was so much wind.
Yeah, not battered.
To just come in and go to the quiet and sit in, again, not knowing is a relief.
But also sometimes when we come back to sit and not knowing, it's a different person who now comes to sit and not knowing than the one before. Right. There's something's shifted. Your mudra has shifted.
So I just wanted to play off of that and just the incredible gift of being able to rest in not knowing. That is I'm not saying I live in it all the time, but I sure live in it more. And what a great gift practice gives in that space.
It's an absolute necessity. Maybe you remember one of the koans that Blanche would use quite often in her teaching most frequently was about the young monk who was going to go on a pilgrimage, and he was getting all this gear together, and the teacher came and said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "Well, I'm going to go on a pilgrimage." It was pretty common in China at that time to do that. And he said, "Oh," and the teacher said, "Well, what's the meaning of pilgrimage?" And the monk said, "I don't know." And he said, "Not knowing is most intimate." That's how you set out. Not knowing, not because you don't have to make a decision. He's going to have to take a step. He's going to have to find the place. He's going to have to. But if you can start without some preconceived ideas then you can actually see the path in front of you rather than just seeing your preconceived ideas.
Right.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't exclude excitement on something, and you move forward and do, I'm excited to plant lettuce today, and you go out and plant lettuce, and
That's right. You do that. And then that adds to the energy of your life. That's another piece of the puzzle. And then what's after that?
Right. Right.
Now, isn't about passivity. It's about opening, like in the Buddhist peacemaker order, you start with not knowing. Second, bearing witness. Third is compassionate action. You start with not knowing so you can wipe out all your preconceived ideas so you bear witness.
Mm-hmm.
So you can really see what's happening. Then you can take action.
Yeah.
But that's our work.
Yeah.
And that formulation is a really good one. That's probably a good place to end today. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we use our 4 practice principles as a guide for precisely what we're talking about. And so let's intone those now. Caught in the self-centered dream, only suffering, holding to self-centered thoughts, exactly the dream. Each moment, life as it is, the only teacher, being just this moment, compassion's way. Caught in the self-centered dream, only suffering, holding to self-centered thoughts, exactly the dream. Each moment, life as it is, the only teacher, being just this moment, compassion's way. Caught in the self-centered dream, only suffering, holding to self-centered thoughts, exactly the dream. Each moment, life as it is, the only teacher, being just this moment, compassion's way.
Thank you so much, Flint. Thank you, everybody. And I just want to remind you that Appamada's programs and facilities are supported through your generosity. So please know your support makes a huge, huge difference. And there's a link at appamada.org/contribution to do that. And we will obviously be intensely grateful. And if you'd like to continue to meet with us and share or just simply connect after the inquiry, just stay here online, put yourself into gallery view, and we'll have another 30 minutes for the online porch. That's if I can say it. And again, thank you so much. We hope you stay around for inquiry.